Karyugan, a lonely loser who lives alone. In Japan, he has no friends or family. One night, while returning home, he sees a crowd of people running out of the supermarket, and they are being chased by an armed robber, and the robber with a knife attacks two girls. Kozan rushes at him and knocks him down. In the end, he is wounded alive and dies on the spot without saying a word. Suddenly, he opens his eyes and sees that he has been reborn in another world. Then the maid is very excited and says that he was unconscious for more than a week. His mother runs into the room to check his temperature, and seeing that he still has a fever, he takes the maid Sylvia and runs to the kitchen to prepare hot soup. He looks at himself in the mirror, and this brings back memories of how he saved the girls, and he is happy. He looks around the room when Sylvia returns with the soup, and this gives him the opportunity to question her. He finds out that his name is Cain von Sylphy, the son of the aristocrat Garm, who is quite rich and influential. He is so strong that he single-handedly prevents invasion from other countries and rules a forest full of monsters. When Cain learns more about monsters and magic, he is very encouraging and begins to study magic. His family says that it is too early for him and advises him to read books first and then be baptized. However, he quickly masters fire magic and secretly continues to practice when no one is around. He also begins to take lessons from his older sister Rin on the history of the kingdom and its inhabitants. 2 years later, on the day of his baptism, he first you see the outer world. When he goes to the temple, his father tells him that today they will inform the 7 gods that he has turned 5 years old and that they have blessed him, which will help him develop magic and skills during the baptism ceremony. In the temple, a strange light comes from the statues of the gods, and Cain is transported to the world of the gods, where they tell him that they have been waiting for him all this time to tell about his reincarnation. Lime, the goddess of life and death, tells him that she has reincarnated the god of the earth for his good deeds. Mistake, however, since it allowed him to quickly learn magic. Cain says he is grateful for it before sending him back. All 7 gods bless him for his sacrifice, which makes him very powerful and gives him a level 10 skill. Since it is so unusual, he decides not to tell anyone about it to avoid questions. Later at dinner, they discussed a strange light again and become curious about what it means. When they see his incredible magical power and skills, his father warns him not to show off his status to anyone because it might be perceived as a threat to the country and he could be taken under the control of the state. Garm also orders the servants not to tell anyone about this and orders them not to mention it even at the opening party. Returning to his room, Cain finds a book on summoning magic on the bed and, making sure that there is no one nearby, goes out into the backyard to try to summon cute furry monsters. But instead he accidentally summons a scary giant who immediately rushes at his sister, who was just passing by. Cain in show cannot move, but remembers how in the supermarket he saved the girl and jumps to save his sister. He immediately uses his fiery fists to hit the monster, but he dodges and hits Cain in the stomach, throwing him into the air. Quickly thinking, he uses a recently learned callback spell, which immediately destroys the monster. Cain falls to the ground and loses consciousness, which very much scares his sister, and she runs up to him to make sure that he is okay. Her tears hurt him, and he tries to get up, which brings her great relief. When she is about to call father to examine his wounds, he stops her and assures her that he is fine. Their smiles bring back painful memories of how 2 girls in the supermarket cried because of him, and he decides to protect everyone around him and save their smiles for the next day. At the opening party, his father asks him to tell what he wants to become, and he announces that he wants to become an adventure seeker to achieve his goal of meeting new people and learning more about the world. Returning home, Garm decides to hire a tutor for Cain because that to become an adventurer you need to study and train. A lot later that day, Cain reads a book in bed, looking forward meeting with a tutor and imagining that it will be some muscular guy or a witch. But then Sylvia tells him that his tutors have arrived. He immediately runs to the window to look and sees 2 girls walking towards the mansion. When he tries to teleport outside to meet them, in his excitement he accidentally teleports to the roof, loses his balance and falls right on the tutor. When the awkwardness passes, the butler introduces him to the tutors. Millie and Mine are invited to the mansion to meet with Garmo, where Cain finds out that Nina is actually an elf. He has never seen an elf before, so it comes as a real surprise to him. After a little conversation, the tutors decide to sign a 3-year contract so that Cain can become an adventurer. They start with fencing lessons, and Nina asks him to do a few lunges so that she can evaluate his skills. Watching him, Nina says that he can be stronger than a mile of the T. Surigo, and she challenges him to a training fight. Kane swings a wooden sword, which Millie manages to block, but at the same time his strength and skill amazes them, and it is hard for them to believe that he is only 5 years old. Nina guesses that he must have received the blessing of the god of war, which Kane confirms and says that he should not tell anyone about this except his family. Millie is tired of the battle and asks him to start magic lessons with Nano. While she rests a little, when Nina decides to start with dreams, Kane tells her that he learned the basics from the book and demonstrates his magic by creating fireballs and stone bullets. Nina is surprised that even at 5 years old Kane can use magic without spells. Although this requires a lot of training, the fact that he can control all the elements and the fact that his stone bullets destroy the wall makes her think that he is also blessed by the god of magic. While the mentors discuss this, Kane takes out his chest with items and shows them a towel, which shocks them even more because only very strong adventurers have such chests. When the mentors say that they cannot teach him to something new because he is already much stronger than them, he asks them to take him outside so that he can practice magic. Can they agree? They go to his father and say that if they teach him intermediate level magic within the walls of the mansion, then he can blow it up. Garm reluctantly agrees on the condition that Kane must return before sunset, not to go far and not to use magic thoughtlessly. As soon as Kane puts on his armor, they leave the city gates and walk along a wide, empty plain where he can practice magic without putting anyone in danger. When Nina orders him to attack the stone of magic, he accidentally causes a powerful wall of fire that throws back his mentors and leaves a crater in the ground. But even after that he is not tired at all, which shocks the mentors even more because this means that he has enormous magic power. Suddenly, the mentors hear a rustling in the bushes and ask Kane to be quiet while they wait. A killer rabbit jumps out of the bushes and rushes at Millie, who immediately takes out the sword and knocks him aside. The rabbit lands on his paws and runs towards Kane, but he dodges and shoots him with their bullets, knocking him down with one shot. His mentors congratulate him on his first catch and say that he can sell it, but Kane puts the rabbit in his inventory to show his mother and older sister. Touched by this, Millie agrees, but advises him to hunt more because he will need money someday and asks Nina to go with him. Nano uses search magic to find the target a few meters away. Them before they go there, yes, Kane asks Nina how she did it and tries it himself. When he understands how it works, to his surprise, he was able to successfully use it and even determine the exact number of targets that only well-trained wizards can do. Before the girls had time to recover from the shock, Kane rushed at the monsters and destroyed one of them with fire. Nina and Millie eventually caught up with him and knocked out one monster each with their staff and sword, respectively. The last monster jumped on Kane, but he pushed him away with an air bullet. When the rabbit came to Saya, he ran into the forest and Kane followed him. The girls stopped him because the forest was full of strong monsters and said that once every few decades they wake up and attack the city. They said that only experienced the adventurer can kill them and protect the city, which further motivated Kane to train hard. Later that night, Kane checked his status and was surprised to see that he immediately went to the 8th level. When he realized that this was due to the fact that the gods gave him the 100 HP trait, he decided that the gods wanted to kill him and cursed them for ruining his plans to go on a journey and have fun in this world. The next day he was confused when the teacher sent him to train in on the opposite side of the city gates. Millie replied that he could easily cope with a much stronger monster, and so they went to the guild to get information about the monsters in the city. Kane was intrigued because it all looks like a plot from a light novel, and he enthusiastically goes to the reception room with his mentors to find out more about his fate. They ask which monster is the killer rabbit, and after looking at the data, she reports that it is a wolf, but she has no information about where he was last seen. Millie is worried at first because wolves always travel in packs, but then remembering Kane's strength, she is sure that he will cope with them. While they are talking, a pumped-up bandit comes up to them and begins to mock their mentors, rudely offering them a drink. They refuse this on Jahan, and he grabs Millie by the hand, and two of his friends grab Millie from behind. When the bandit is about to hit her in the face, Kane grabs his hand and politely asks him to leave them alone. The girls ask him to run away, but he stands his ground and hits the bandit in the hand. When he does not let go of the mine from the blow, the bandit falls face down on the floor. The bandit gets up even more enraged and punches Kane. Bo dodges and instead kicks the bandit in the knee, causing him to lose his balance and fall face down on the floor. The giant gets up again to hit Kane, but he dodges again and kicks him in the leg. after which the bandit finally loses his temper and takes out a sword. He hits the boy with a superhuman blade thrown out with one finger, and without much effort to prevent the boy from attacking them, Cain bravely rushes at them with the sword. Despite this and also the ability to fight in hand-to-hand combat as well as his strong magic, and soon decide not to waste any more time and go to the forest. After a short practice in magic, they spread a blanket on the grass, they sat down to have lunch, and then went back to the mansion. The next 3 years passed peacefully. Cain trained hard under the guidance of a girl. One day, when he returned home from training, Sylvia brought him a change of clothes and told him that his teacher refused to renew the contract. She asked if he wanted to ask the Gormash to do it, but he refused because he didn't want to be dependent on them forever and decided to thank them for being so kind to him all these 3 years. He suddenly remembered that Million always wanted a magic bag but couldn't buy it because it was very expensive, and decided to make one for both of them. Later that night, he teleported into the forest to get material for the bag. He entered the forest and met a huge blood ogre that would be perfect for the red bag he wanted to make. He easily defeats him with a powerful fire explosion and places it in his chest. Then he Earth Dragon for Nina's green bag and again launches a fire blast at him to catch him. After that, he teleports back to the castle collecting all the necessary materials from the observation tower near the castle. Garm, who saw these volcano-like fire explosions, raises the alarm about the monster invasion and the army is in charge with Garmo. He sets off in the direction from where the explosion was. This causes panic among civilians, who begin to pray along the way. The army discovers a huge crater in the forest formed as a result of the explosion and meets on the spot his informant, who says that he did not see any monsters, although he searched for them for a very long time. As soon as Garm thinks about who caused the explosions, he notices Cain's handkerchief in the crater and is angry with his son for causing unnecessary panic. The next day, on their last day together, the girls see how Cain easily deals with a wolf attack with their bullets, and then they are overcome by sadness when Cain catches all the wolves in his chest. He announces that he is finished for today, and the teachers come up to say goodbye to him. He thanks them for everything and takes out the magic bags from the chests that he made for them and gives them to them. When he says that he made the bags himself after defeating the monsters, the girls at first cannot say anything because only groups of rank can defeat monsters, and they were shocked that the bag turned out to be larger than they expected and realized that it was an item of national treasure. Before parting, the teachers promised him that they would always be in touch for the next few years. Cain was traveling alone, and one day he met a giant red one. The dragon attacked him to bite him, but Cain returned and thrust the sword into his head. The dragon collapsed to the ground and the woe was thrown aside from the blow. Having come to his senses, he checked whether the dragon was alive and was surprised that he had defeated such a strong opponent. His characteristics amazed him. After 2 years, he went to the capital with his family to receive the status of a nobleman, which all sons of the nobility must go through. Ring was looking forward to starting his studies in the capital, and Cain could only go to school at the age of 12. Decided to help the guards and use search magic to reconnoiter the situation. He felt that there was a battle on their way and warned his father that there were more monsters than people. Garm sent several guards to help, but since they did not have time, Cain decided to join them. He jumped out of the carriage and used wine magic to rush to the place of the battle. Cain saw that more than 50 wild boars were attacking the princess's carriage and all her guards except one were defeated. When the monster rushed at the last guard, Cain jumps onto the roof of the carriage and kills the monster with an air blade and then rushes it into the fight. He kills one monster after another by shooting at them with air bullets. Then he flies into the air, cuts one of the larger monsters and looks back to see that 3 more monsters are approaching the guard. Realizing that they are too close to the guard for him to use magic without harming the person, Cain takes out a sword from his inventory and rushes at monsters, attacking them from behind. Then he turns his attention to the boss of the monsters. The boss tries to crush him with his paw, but Cain dodges, jumps high and sets the monster on fire with his sword before hitting him on the head. The monster is cut in half and disappears. When Cain approaches the guard to talk to him, he gets scared and asks Cain to stay put. As soon as Cain introduces himself to con the guard, Garm's guards appear and are surprised to see Cain and a bunch of dead monsters around. At this moment, the princess's guard falls to the ground and Cain rushes to help him. He uses healing magic to heal the wounds of the guard and all the defeated guards and asks him to rest and eat to recover since all the other guards are already dead. Cain puts them in his inventory he take home tired of watching anime on his phone or laptop. I just upgraded my experience of watching anime from a small monitor to an incredible 10-inch screen with this amazing mini projector. It's like personal cinema. It has built-in applications such as YouTube, Crunchyroll. Netflix is the dream of any fan, so what are you waiting for? Follow the link below to find out more and use the Anima promo code to get a 20% discount on your first order. Back to the video. Garm appears on the scene and seeing a terrible picture asks his guards to tell him the details. While examining, he notices the coat of arms on the Duke's carriage and is going to check if everything is okay with the passengers, but then the princess comes out of the carriage. Countries Princess Tell and Miss Silger Soga. While they are getting acquainted, Tell loses consciousness from the shock. Kane quickly uses his magic to calm the girls and they feel as if they are in a garden full of roses and all their pain and fatigue disappear. Then Kane removes his magic, returning the girls to reality, and they are full of strength and inspired by the bow. They begin to talk to him. They find out that he is also going to his debut and invite him to go with them. Drags him into the carriage because next to him they feeling safe. Kane begs his awesome father to save him from their clutches, but they successfully drag him into the carriage and leave while the girls are chatting with Kane. And soon they reach the city of Renamag. Decided to stop for a day. When they arrived in Reno, Kane tried to escape from the girls and rest, but they insisted on staying together so that he could protect them from the attack of monsters or nightmares. Kane reluctantly agreed, and the three of them settled in the same room, where the girls moved their beds as close to Kane as possible. The next morning, when they hit the road again, Kane was very sleepy because due to the fact that two girls slept in the same room with him bed, he could not sleep. After a few days of travel, they reached the capital, and they got off the ship in front of the royal palace. The assistant captain of the royal guard, Dime von Gazar, told Kane that the story of his bravery had already reached the capital and thanked him for protecting the girls and returning his comrades home while they were preparing the bodies of the dead guardsmen for the funeral. Yes, he informed Kane that the king wanted to see him. After a few hours, Kane was escorted to the throne room where he met with the king. The herald told those present in the hall about the battle. As a reward for the rescue, the king made Kane a knight and gave him money and his own mansion. One of the townspeople opposed the fact that a 10-year-old boy was given such a large reward, but the king shut him up by saying that his decision was not subject to discussion. The king releases the courtiers and invites Kane and his father to the office for an informal conversation. In the office, that such a gifted and powerful boy can't be left alone. That's why he became a baron, to be close to him. After discussing the details of his service, the king and the duke propose that Kane marry their daughters because they slept in the same bed and scream for him to agree despite his protests. A few days later, Kane again goes to the gods to find out his status, and because of his incredible abilities, they offer him to become a demigod. They also ask him to use his knowledge from his past life to make life in this world more interesting and provide for them entertainment, to which he agrees. Later that day, while Rin is shopping, Kane gets bored and leaves the store, where he meets his friend Palma, who came to the city to train in her uncle's store. When her uncle comes out to say hello to him, Kane says that he is interested in looking at their store and goes inside. After looking around, he sees how experienced her uncle Ten Men's is and asks if he can create and sell an entertainment game as he promised to the gods, explaining to him what kind of game he is investing in her money, and leaves the store, where he encounters an angry Rin, whom he completely forgot about later. When he was already at his sister's, a maid entered the room and gave him a note from Timus in which he asked him to come into the shop. When he arrived, Timus showed him a prototype of a board and a cane, and he liked the way it looked. He showed how to play this instrument, and seeing this, the shopkeeper was sure that the instrument would sell well. Kane advised him to make 2 different versions for ordinary people, for the nobility, and gave it to him more money to help him start production. When everything was ready, Gems suggested that they sign the contract and show it to the god of trade, so that no one else could produce the same product for 3 years. The prototype disappeared, which meant that the contract came into force, and they decided to start sales in a month. He ordered 1 luxury set to give it to the royal family and went to his mansion. As soon as he entered, he was immediately escorted out. Before entering the ceremonial hall, his father warned him to be on guard. As they walked through the hall, Kane noticed a nobleman's basket who opposed his title along with his son. Kane decided to ignore them, and in the end he and his family ran into the Duke. Ken Silk and the bow and the girl got carried away by flirting. The Duke interrupted them to bring them back to reality and they went to different corners of the hall. Soon the trumpets announced the arrival of the king, who appeared on the stairs with his family, and the ceremony began. When Garn and his family go to pay respects to the royal family, Cain again begins to flirt with Sil, which infuriates Garn and the king. Then Cain invites the king to play the noble game that he is prince to distract him. After the ceremony, the king makes an appointment for Cain in the living room so that he can teach him how to play, and Cain can talk to him about his daughter. After they leave, Garm asks Cain to leave to talk with someone he knows, and immediately taking advantage of the moment, Silk approaches him while they are talking. Habit and his minions approach them, and Habit begins to flirt with Silk, but she ignores him. They mistake Cain for the son of the Baron, and therefore for a man of low birth. They begin mocking, and in the end decide to find out who is stronger. One of the henchmen uses lightning magic and throws a weak fireball at Cain, which he easily dodges. Another henchman throws stone bullets at him, but they are so slow that Cain easily moves away from them when they are about to attack him again. Silk interrupts them and puts them in their place by saying who Cain is. In fact, scared, the bows bow to him and run away. At this moment, Els comes out into the garden to find out what happened. Tells hears about the day and promises Cain that he will get it, but the king, who suddenly appears on the lawn, overhears their conversation. Cain is horrified that the king will scold him again for raising his daughter, but the girls, not paying attention to this, cuddle up to him, upset the king even more. Later in the living room, the king's chief minister hands Cain the keys and a map to his new mansion. He reports that the king will not join them today because he is so wanted to play with the boat that the minister had to make sure that he did not interfere and carried out his duties. Cain sighs when the duke bursts into the room to catch the boat before he leaves, and they could play together. In the end, several courtiers line up to play with him. After finishing playing, he follows the map to look at his new mansion and comes to a dilapidated abandoned house. Praying that there are no ghosts there, he turns the key, opens the door and goes inside to examine the house. After finishing inspection, he uses magic to put the house in order, lies down on the bed and enjoys his rest when Sylvia appears with her new maids and the butler. The maids prepare to receive his luggage, and the butler reminds him that his older brothers John and Alec are returning today, and he needs to go to the Garm mansion during lunch at the Garm house. When his family wonders at the mansion, looks like Cain invites them on a tour, and they are surprised at how clean and modern it is. Cain shows his family the various magical devices in the house, and his father explains that the tradition is to have an opening party later. When Cain draws up the guest list and menu for the party, Celia advises him not to worry about the formality and be himself. This inspires him to bring things from his past life to the party to make it unique. He comes up with his own unique glasses for gifts to the nobles instead of the standard ceramic ones, and treats the guests to food and drinks from his world that night for the opening. Nobles from all over the city come to the opening, and everyone likes unusual food and drinks. In the midst of the fun, Corsina appears and begins make fun of everything that is happening. But Cain orders the king to put the arrogant nobleman in his place, and the party is successful. A few days after the party, Prime Minister Magno asks Cain to bring materials about monsters. When he arrives at the castle, he meets the dime, who asks to leave the huge monsters on the ground so that the knights can deal with them later. Cain is about to leave, but the dime stops him and asks for help in training the knights at the training ground. The dime introduces the Baron to the other knights, and to do training more fun, orders them to arrange a training battle with Cain. First, the knights underestimate the boy and decide to fight him one by one. Cain uses his magic to sweep across the training field with incredible speed and disarm the first guard before he can understand what is happening. Seeing his strength, they decide to attack him all together, but at that moment the commander of the Fenvon rebel notices. Then man jumps down onto the field to stop the attack on the boy. When Cain introduces Cain to her, she takes out her sword and offers him to fight even though he only has a wooden sword. The commander lunges and jumps back to increase the distance. She uses magic to fly up to him, but Cain jumps on the wall and dodges. They rush at each other. Their swords whistle through the air and the speed of their battle increases. Cain lands on the ground and with the help of magic rushes at the fan, pretending to attack her, and when she swings her sword, he teleports behind her back and puts the sword to her neck, showing that she lost. Realizing his strength, she decides to marry him, and when he says that he is only 10, she replies that she is an elf and will live 300 years, so can she wait? He reminds her that she cannot make such a decision on her own, and she asks the dime to arrange an audience with the king to discuss this and asks to bring the boy despite his protests. When Fana informs the king about her decision, he becomes furious and demands that Cain vs tell him. He explains that Fana is a princess of an elven country who rebelled and that her courtship of him is very serious. He tells her his engagement to the forces and says that this is only Cain's encouragement to the arena of the incredible strength that helped him defeat the strongest knight in the country. Arouses the king's suspicion, and he finds out who he is. After this, Fen every day challenges Cain to a duel, which exhausts him. He tries to escape, but Dime catches him and drags him back to the royal hall where King Magno is waiting for them. Hands him a book roll magic written by the first king to find out who he is. Cain is delighted with the book, and while he is reading it, the king says that none of them can read it because it is written in Japanese, which they do not know. The king asks him about it and demands that he say who he is. Realizing that he can no longer deceive them, Cain decides to tell them the truth, but only if they swear. He tells them everything about his past life, and Garm begins to doubt whether Cain is really his son. He assures them that he is the one apostle and that this was confirmed by the gods themselves. He does not understand that his meeting with the gods will be a shock to everyone when he reveals his status at their request. They understand that he is not a man but an apostle of God, and that this is the highest title in the world that everyone should know about. Then Cain tells them about his life since the moment of reincarnation and says that he is happy with who he is now and what he has. He asks them to keep his secret so that he can continue to live such a happy life, and asks them to treat him the same way as before. At this moment, Stefana bursts into the room with a letter from her father, which says that Cain is marrying Mary, and excitedly drags him back to the duel field. He begins to study the book of the first king of Yue more carefully and finds a page where Yue talks about himself and mentions that he was also from Japan. He reads that Yue was also reincarnated, bursts into the library after seeing the book. They think that he is preparing for the upcoming entrance exams and say that they will also prepare with him. But he gains courage and tells them that he will not prepare today or tomorrow and runs away. He manages to escape from them, and he sighs with relief, but then Afen runs up to him and calls him. She challenges him to a duel outside the capital, but he runs away again because today is his 12th birthday and he can finally register as an adventurer. He enters the guild where he meets an adventurer who advises him to be careful and seems familiar to him with these thoughts. He approaches the secretary Lisha, who gives him a registration form. He fills it out and returns it to the secretary, and she asks him to drop a drop of blood on the crystal. This is part of the procedure. She explains that the drop of blood will help register his Manu in the guild card and hands him the card he just received. It reminds him of his teachers and he thinks how they are doing. Now Lisha distracts him from these thoughts and says that he can come at any time if he has questions while she is talking to him. A group of rude adventurers approaches her and tries to persuade her to come with them. Cain looks at them disappointed, and this makes them angry. One of them kicks him, but he disappears and the man falls. This enrages the other two men, and one of them punches him, but he disappears again to teleport behind him. When the big guy loses his balance and falls face down, the leader becomes even more furious and orders his companions to attack him. As they both rush towards him, he stepped aside and they crashed into each other and fell. At the moment when the leader was about to draw his sword, an adventurer named Claude, who was here earlier, came and scared them away. When Lisha and Cain thanked him, he said that he felt the bow's strength, so he stopped them for their own sake. Blessings, and there is no need to thank him. He's impressed by Cain and invites him to have a drink where he praises his technique and asks about his training. He tells him about his mentors and they drink to him and his future. After a sip, Cain asks Claude his nickname is Ice Flame, and he replies that since he uses the fire sword and his wife is ice, their team is called that way. He tells the boy that he needs to look for such comrades whom he can trust and with whom he can work in order to quickly climb the career ladder, as he himself says that even though he is an adventurer of Ranka, there are also higher wounds, for example, Wound S, which the king has. While they are talking, someone hits Claude on the head with a wooden staff, and turning around he sees his wife Lena. When he introduces her to the boy and asks him to join the conversation, she asks him to stop wasting time and go with her to prepare for the task that he himself accepted. Cain interrupts then and introduces himself to Lena, and she asks him to be careful because there are a lot of hooligans around and promises that he can call her if he has any problems. Claude intervenes in the conversation and praises the guy while he drinks. But then she hits him again on the head and asks him to stop drinking because he wants to stay alive, and then drags him out of the bar by the ear. Kane returns to the guild to look at the available tasks, but finds only boring ones. For example, clearing runes and carrying things. While he looks at the board with tasks, his eyes fall on the request to defeat the goblins in the eastern forest, or the reward depends on the number of killed. He inspires, accepts the tasks, and runs out of the guild heading into the forest. Suddenly Typhus appears on the street. She runs to him and asks if he wants to join the training outside the capital. When Kane tells her that he cannot because he has his first task, she offers to go with him. She entrusts him with the training. Kane, who tries to run away and drags him along, takes him to the eastern forest and further to find goblins, and he uses search magic to explore the surroundings of Typhus. Overjoyed and without hesitation rushes towards the goblins and asks Kane to catch up with her. In the end, they get to a place where barrels of booze and food are scattered on the ground, as well as wounded merchants who must have been left by the goblins. Then she notices a horde of goblins in the distance, and as soon as she shows them to Kane, they rush towards them, which scares the goblins. Kane uses healing magic to help the merchants, and the commander draws her sword and jumps, striking the goblin's neck. She defeats all the goblins, but even more appear from the bushes, and Kane strengthens her magic so that she can cope with so many creatures. She rushes at a huge group with one swing of her sword, cuts them into pieces, and then jumps and cuts their boss in half. But as soon as she celebrates the victory, a flock of greens comes running to the battle-side lizards, and Kane orders Fanat to take the man to a safe place and trust him to fight them. As they leave, Kane turns his attention to the lizards and launches a ball of light at them to completely blind them, continuing to attack. After a few minutes, Millie and Nana stumble upon the crater left by Kane's magic and are surprised that there are no monsters around. Despite the information about green lizards, Nana turns to leave and Millie tries to stop her, but in the end, there is nothing left to do but go home. After returning from the forest, Kane appears again in the guild and asks the administrator if he can kill the green lizards. Without completing the task, she is surprised and explains that this is a task of rank D if you do it alone, and is glad that everything is fine with him. When he tells her that there were 30 of them, she is even more surprised and runs to the head of the guild to inform him about this unusual case. The head of the guild asks to bring the boy to him. When the boy enters the office, he introduces himself as Cedric and says that he is temporarily replacing the head of the guild while he is busy at a meeting. The head of the guild immediately assumes that the boy has committed some kind of fraud by killing monsters, but Leisha tries to stop him because they have no evidence. Cedric says that since he is a commoner, as it is clear from his name in the registry, he cannot trust him because commoners often do such things for the sake of a reward. When Kane tries to object, he shuts the boy up and warns that his street in the guild will be annulled because of this behavior. He does not pay attention to Lishy's pleas and says that his decision is final and asks the boy to leave. Kane is very upset when the head of the guild comes into the room to find out what all the fuss is about. The head of the guild tells him what the boy is saying, and this amuses the master. He laughs at the fact that Cedric does not know anything and calls his guest Tef, who says that she came to discuss further measures against goblins and green lizards. The master tells Cedric about the personality and strength of the boy and Kane that he did not indicate his title in the questionnaire, who avoids special treatment. He also says that he found his brother and Kane becomes his future brother-in-law. Cedric immediately apologizes and asks for forgiveness. He forgives Cedric and asks the master, is it possible to accept green lizards, to which he answers in the affirmative and asks Alice to take him to the storage room. The master also thinks about promoting Kane because he accomplished a great feat and wants to promote him to the next rank, but the Fana believes that this is too low a rank for someone who is stronger than her and defeated a red dragon at the age of 10. After thinking, the master decides to promote him to the next rank and instructs him to monitor applications for joining the guild. Then he sends the fox and Cedric to settle the formalities and talks to Kane not as a master, but as a brother Kafin, and asks him to take care of his little sister in the world of the gods. All the gods are watching what is happening, and one of them is worried that the assignment of 10 blessings was a mistake that led to such a commotion. The god of creation replies that this is definitely not the case and that Kane needs to become stronger because Aaron is an evil wizard who can put the whole world in danger. Is about to wake up. They decide to personally make sure that the boy trains as hard as possible in order to be ready to face the threat and save the world on the day of the entrance exam to the academy. Kane is late and Sylvia has to rush him so that he makes it on time. Kane runs out of the house, and as soon as Sylvia doesn't see him, he teleports to the Royal Academy Exam Center in the academy. He walks up to the front desk, introduces himself, and asks for his room. He's surprised that he doesn't see any familiar faces as he walks down the hallway, looking for his class. Kane passes the written tests in just half an hour instead of the 2 hours that were allotted and is asked to take a test for magical ability. Students are asked to use their best magical skills to hit the target, and looking at the weak fireballs of other students, Kane realizes that using all his power in the academy grounds where there is so much around a lot of people can be dangerous. When it's finally his turn, he launches a controlled blue fireball at the target, which is still strong enough to break through the wall of the academy behind the target and set the forest behind a little on fire. After the examiners recover from the shock, they run out to check if anyone behind the wall was hurt by the fireball's impact. Hastily, they ask the children to move on to the fencing exam. At the fencing exam, several rank adventurers are present, including Claude, to support the examiners. Seeing Kane in the group, Claude invites him to be his opponent, but Kane tries to refuse, but in the end is forced to agree since he is one of the highest-ranking examiners today. When they take their positions, Claude asks him to attack with full force, and assuming that he is very strong adventurer, Kane decides to give it his all. He strengthens himself with magic and strikes at the adventurer, which Claude easily blocks, their swords moving so fast that the other students do not see their movements at all. As the duel continues, the load becomes more and more fun, and he decides to use magic too. However, the main teacher asks them to stop because they can deprive another exam of the chances of success if they continue to fight at this level. Waking up from his thoughts, Claude says goodbye to Kane and asks him to join him in the next test. While they talk, the observer scolds them for delaying the others and asks Kane to go home and come back only at the announcement of the results in the evening. When he returns to his mansion and tells Sylvia that the exam went well, she offers to organize a party to apologize for not waking him up in the morning despite his refusal. She decides to cook him dinner and runs away to the kitchen. The next day, in the palace, he is called by the king because he received a bill for repairs from the academy. When they ask him what happened, Kane tells the king everything what happened and asks if he can practice high magic somewhere without risking harm. King Magno and the Duke refuse. While they discuss it, the king asks where he took the exam because the girls did not see him in the exam center. When they find out that he took the exam in the south wing of the academy, they tell him what it is. Wing for commoners and aristocrats take an exam in the north wing. This also caused some to skill, because of which the headmaster turned to the Duke for advice because a commoner student received the highest score for damage to property and fought on par with an adventurer of rank, and the Duke immediately recognized this student and asked the headmaster to leave everything as is and not to worry. After a good thrashing, who told him that he was the best in his class and added that he had better come to the entrance ceremony if he doesn't want to kneel before leaving in not minutes. When he entered the academy, he saw that Rain was leading the new students and went to her. She was very happy to see him and said that according to the tradition of the races, he is the best student. He will have to give a speech at the ceremony. At home, Sylvia nervously walked from corner to corner waiting for his return. As soon as he returned, he told her that he became the best in his class, and Sylvia ran off to prepare a celebratory dinner. On the day of the entrance ceremony, he noticed that his parents were sitting on balcony and was glad that they were able to come. At that moment, the girls enter and took him to the stage where he sat next to them, making the other guys jealous. The ceremony began and Kane was called on stage to give a speech to the students. Touched by his speech, everyone was excited when suddenly the presence of the king was announced and asked him to speak too. During his speech, he makes fun of Kane in front of everyone and then takes him aside to talk. Because of this, Kane is late for the first lesson. He walks into class when their homeroom teacher, Ulka, is already about to start the lesson and sits down next to the forces. When everyone calms down, she gives them a drone to choose courses and professions. When Kane decides to choose the adventurer course, the girls insist that he choose the aristocrat course because he still has a lot to learn. By looking at his sad face, they convince him that he can choose the adventurer course as an additional one. When he realizes that he can choose more than one course, he decides to enroll in the aristocrat adventurer course of Magic and Magical Tools. Tellus chooses a home economics course as an additional course to a commerce course. After the lesson, when Kane leaves the class, he notices a habitation coves who are bullying Palmoda as she is studying in a class for aristocrats. He approaches them and tells them to back off because they have no right to command in this school, where everyone is equal. When the guys ask him why he stands up for a commoner, he introduces her as his girlfriend and says that he doesn't care if she is a commoner or an aristocrat. Havoc gets angry and threatens him that he will ask his father to destroy the house of a commoner, and this is heard by Sil, who joins the conversation. The guys are already scared when the body appears and threatens to complain to her father. Habit and his henchmen immediately fall to their knees in front of them and apologize. But they ask him to apologize to Palman, and does, and then runs away. Palma thanks him and is glad that she and Kane study in the same school and would like them to be in the same class. Kane asks her not to worry and promises that if she needs anything he will be in touch. This makes his girls jealous, and they force him to kneel down and take him away to talk. Kane doesn't hear what they're talking about, but it looks like they're Polid, and it worries him because he's sure that he'll be bullied. Suddenly he hears someone's voice calling him, and they ask him to come up for a minute. He tries to understand where the voice is coming from, but doesn't see anyone, and the voice asks him to come to the library. The boy teleports to the library and sees a man who stands with his back to the door and pours himself coffee. Surprised that there is coffee in this world, Kane asks who he is like this, and the man answers that he was waiting for him and says that he knows his real identity from a past life. The mysterious man asks him to calm down and says that the gods told him about the bow, and when Kane asks how he met them, the man replies that his name is Yuya. This scares the boy even more, because the first king lived about 300 years ago, and he is sure that in front of him the ghost of Yue is just laughing and asks him to evaluate his strength. And when the boy reveals the status of the man, he sees that he is the god of creation, and this greatly surprises him. He asks the boy sit down so they can talk about why he called him, and when the boy sits down he says that the gods asked him to train him. When Kane says that he is too strong now and does not need training, Yuya asks him to try to snatch the cookie from his hands. Despite the fact that Kane is approaching him at great speed, Yuya dodges and draws his sword faster than the bow, which proves that Kaiwell there is still room to grow. When he asks why he needs to be so strong, the First King tells him about the Baron who terrorized the world 300 years ago. He tells how the evil god made people kill each other, spreading distrust of other nations. He continues to say that although he and his friends were able to seal Eren many years ago, the seal began to weaken, what could mean that Eren will soon be resurrected. When he is asked why he himself cannot seal him again, he says Kaiwell, he can no longer interfere in the affairs of the world since he is now God, and therefore the responsibility for this lies with Kane. He immediately teleports the mirror to the world he created and hands the boy a sword, promising that he will tell him something about his past life if he completes the first task, and immediately teleports. Yuri realizes that he forgot to give the boy task and returns, hands him a compass and asks him to follow him, pointing to a mansion in the mountains, and says that he needs to get there. He also says that to defeat Eren, you need to increase the level to at least 600 and forbids the use of teleportation magic, explaining that here time flows very quickly and there is nowhere to rush. After that he teleports, asking the boy to meet him in the mansion. 5 minutes later, in the forest, he meets a huge snake, and a group of giant ochre manages to catch him, and he is about to eat him, but Kane hits him with lightning in the mouth and kills him, and he lands safely on the ground. Returning to his world, Sylvia runs to the door, hearing a knock, thinking that it was Kane who has returned after a whole day of absence, but opening the door she sees the princesses and their guards. They say that they came to visit Kane, and at first they are worried when they find out about his disappearance, but then they calm down because it is Kane and decide to wait for him in a mansion in another world. A month has passed and Kane is so tired that he lies down on the ground and begins to cry out the hope of getting out of the forest. When he is already falling asleep, he hears an alarmed voice in the forest and instinctively goes to him. In the end, he finds a wounded white wolf in the forest and is going to kill him to put him out of his suffering, but when he is about to pierce him with a sword, he remembers the incidents in the supermarket and his desire to find someone whom he could protect forever. Therefore, although he has almost no magical power left, he uses it to completely heal the wolf, and from this he loses consciousness while he waits for Kane to come to his senses. The wolf protects him from several oshers trying to attack him. As soon as Kane opens his eyes, the wolf joyfully jumps into his arms and begins to gently lick his face. Having learned that Kane, one wolf asks him to take him with him, and when Kane agrees, he decides to call him Haku. Since then they have gone through many dangers together to protect each other. After 4 years, They finally get to the mansion, and when Kane opens the door he sees Yue who waiting for him inside. Haku tells the boy that this is a divine and very powerful creature called Fenrir and advises him to enter into a summoning contract with him. If he is so attached to Kane, Kane decides to try and immediately enters into a contract with Haku. Under the guidance of Yue he learns to summon the beast whenever he wants. Then Yue introduces Kane to a new trainer, who will now train Duran. However, before the accusation is handed over, Kane reminds him of his promise to tell more about Arini and him past life, and he agrees to start a conversation. Duran tells him that Eren is much more powerful than Yuya and therefore Kane is not even close to him. Yuya adds that he was originally the god of games among the 7 gods, and the reason why there is no entertainment in Kane's world is because he is not there anymore. He tells him that Eren was banished for using the oracle to force people around the world to play the deadly games. If he returns, these deadly games will start again, and the only way to defeat Eren is to become stronger and develop his power. Yuya further tells him that although he managed to defeat Eren, he could not protect his friends who in the past turned out to be his parents' life. He shows K in his past where all 3 were called to protect this world from Eren and reincarnated into very powerful heroes, I swear by the 7 gods. To complete this task in the final battle, Kazu's mother Imigumi launched Varan with her inferno, but it had no effect on him. His father Yuya rushed towards him with their swords and began to cut him down, but the evil god managed to easily dodge them. When Se managed to strike, he got angry and threw glass shards at everyone around him, killing most of them. When several fragments almost hit the princess, Megumi jumped in front of her and sacrificed herself to save her. The princess tried to bring her back with the help of magic but failed, and she died in her arms. This angered her and he, using all his magical power, rushed at Eren and, in the end, was able to pierce his chest with a sword, giving Yue the opportunity to seal him, although they were successful. Noxia spent all his energy and was so badly wounded that he lost consciousness and died in Yu's arms. This prompted Kane to train even harder to take revenge and protect his loved ones from the life he leads now. To atone for the past, Darren and Kane immediately begin their training. They conduct a training fight on a rocky field nearby, and Kane begins by using acceleration to rush at Dora and stab him. Darren, however, he easily dodges and grabs Kane and knocks him to the ground. Kane loses consciousness. The next morning, he wakes up in an unfamiliar place, leaves the room, and goes down the stairs, where his is an elf who introduces herself as Dora's wife. On Ruri, she tells him that Darren Prince brings him into their house unconscious and bruised after yesterday's training. When she leaves to cook him something to eat, he notices a small dragon by the stairs and immediately begins to play with it. But then a Haku attacks Kane from behind, knocks him down, and bares his teeth at the dragon standing over the wood. Kane tries to stop the fight, but Haku continues to bark and the dragon flies away, and Haku growls. This irritates Ruri and she scolds them in grief that if they don't stop she won't give them food. When the commotion subsides, Kane happily sits down at the table to eat, and the food turns out to be so delicious that he cries with happiness. He hasn't eaten his fill for so long that in an instant the eye eats everything, and the couple sheltered. He says that he has nothing to worry about anymore, because now he will live with them at home. The princess is very bored and worries about him, but decides to wait and believes that he will soon return because the knights are looking for him everywhere. But then they are brought back to reality by Sylvia, who teaches them how to cook and scolds them for not working well. On the other hand, Kane trains hard with gifts for several days, practicing punches in battle. And now he does much better, but he still comes exhausted, bruised and unconscious. He becomes stronger every day by day, and in the end they move on to sword training. Seeing how Kane trains hard every day, cutting and fighting, Yue believes in him more and more. In the end the boy becomes truly strong, and one day, inspired by what she showed, Yue uses all his power and defeats Duran, smash his sword into pieces. The coach falls to the ground, and Kane puts the sword to Doro's throat, declaring his victory and making the coach proud of himself. He runs to the cemetery where his parents are buried and finds Yuya there. First, the king tells him that they always worried about him and were looking for a way to return to their world. When Kane feels gratitude and cannot hold back his tears, Yuya thanks him for his hard training and protection, and also for the fact that he took revenge for everyone, and takes out a cookie that Kane manages to grab, and this makes Yuya smile. He offers Kane to rest a little, but he says that he needs to return to his world as soon as possible. impossible and runs away. Yuya stops him and reminds him that in the 5 years spent here he has matured a lot, and it will be strange and incomprehensible for people in his world because only 5 days have passed there. Then he uses magic to reverse the aging process and asks Cain takes the Haku with him. At that moment Doran appears and introduces him to the dragon child of the genie, with whom he also enters into a contract. Cain is going to teleport back to his world, but Yuya gives him the sword and asks him to come visit at any time. When he disappears, both trainers remember him with tenderness, and Doran admits that he is sure that one day Cain will become stronger than them, to which Yuya agrees, saying that it is obvious because he is someone to protect and that he is loved and protected by those around him. When Cain returns to their mansion, Sylvia and the princesses cry joyfully and run to meet him. He apologizes for making them worrying so much, and they say that they always believed that he would return. They talk about their culinary adventures and show him the cookies that they baked for him because Sylvia said that he loves this dish. He begins to cry with happiness and eats every last crumb, enjoying the fact that he returned home rested. He goes to the king and tells him about his adventures and about the new world that the first king created. Then he adds that he showed them the katana that Yue gave him, and they immediately recognize this weapon as belonging to Yue and believe his story. Cain also tells him that for 5 years he trained hard in that world. The Duke tells him that while Cain was away, Gil sent him an OTT, which said that Cain forgot to complete the tasks necessary for promotion in rank. The Duke says that if he does not complete them soon, his membership in the guild will be revoked. He also says that the fan was very lonely without their daily training battles. Cain apologizes, saying that the academy has loaded him with work, to which the master replies that he must complete the task in order to maintain his membership. He clarifies that Cain needs this task immediately, and when the boy agrees, asks him to deal with the bandits. He passes on details about a group of children and people heading to the capital from the territory of Gracia. He assures the master that he will deal with them and immediately teleports into the forest. Then he uses his magic to fly over the road and reconnoiter the situation. He notices the group bandits who are going to attack the carriage and get involved in a fight. He understands that the target of the bandits is the father of Nina. Millie and Palma stands. He sees that Millie is wounded and rushes to her to help, and the bandits only laugh at him because he is still a child. He uses his magic to heal her wounds and uses a magical impulse when the bandits rush at him with swords on his head. He hits one of the bandits in the leg and he falls face down, and the bandit who rushes at him gets stabbed in the stomach by Shiva's katana. He blocks the sword of the third bandit with his katana and pushes him away while sprinting into a tree. Then he rushes through the rest of the bandits and throws them, knocking them down. The group thanks him, and when he asks what they are going to do with the bandits, they find out that he received a task from the guild and are surprised that he received a wound. Although this is a rank C task, he shows them his golden guild card and they are shocked by what he just jumped through several ranks to become an adventurer rank. And when Sabine asks the girls what they are going to do with the bandits, Cain intervenes and says that he was ordered to catch them and take them with him. He puts them in a cage and drags them into a city that pleases the townspeople who have long suffered from these bandits. When they brought Sabina to Taman, he thanked them and asked to accompany him to the palm tree. The palm tree opened the door and rushed to hug her father and Cain. But noticing the bandits in the cages, she asked about them. Savannah told her about everything, what happened, and the palm tree was surprised that the Baron found time for this. Despite the fact that he also studied at school, Nina and Ninel were shocked that he became a baron, and when they started tease him, he said that he had to report to the guild and left, but they also went with him when he came to the guild. He said that the task and gave the certificate that he received from Sabina as proof. She was going to go and inform the master about it, but then the same big guy who pestered Nina and Millie appeared and offered to show them the city. When they refused and walked away, he extended his hand to grab them, but Cain rushed to the rescue and stopped him when Cain called on his magic. They found out. They retreated in fear but immediately realized that Claude and Lino were behind them, and they got even more scared and ran away. Cain hurried to them to say hello and explained what happened when they asked why he got involved with these bandits. He was going to introduce them to his mentors, but he found out that they already knew each other because Millie is Claude's younger sister. Millie tells her brother that she trained Cain since he was 5 years old, and just when Claude is about to offer to go have a drink with the Drake, His wife hits him in the face with his staff, claiming that he is turning into an alcoholic. In the end, they do go for a drink, and Millie tells Claude about what happened with the bandits this afternoon. They also tell him that Kane is now an adventurer of rank, which at first shocks him, but then he remembers how strong his friend is and everything falls into place. He adds that Kane was able to keep up with him during the exam, shocking the girls, who add that he is now also a Darren. If Feynman decides to stop talking as if the Baron is not in the room, ask him what is the secret of his power, but you are again distracted by Lena, who finds out that he can create magical bags of the level of national treasure and asks him about it. Lena falls asleep in the middle of the conversation because of the drink, and when Claude picks her up and says that she will be fine tomorrow, the boy remembers that he has lessons and runs home because it's late. While the adults are discussing Kane, Lithium comes out with a worried look and says that the adventurer, who was supposed to teach classes tomorrow, is injured, so she urgently looks for replacement. Claude asks her to tell him more about the vacancy and offers to replace the teacher for one day on behalf of the group. The next day, Kane's magic class begins at school, and his teacher asks the students to practice using the magic they do best. Kane is very happy to show off his success in magic with you, but the teacher says that he is not allowed to use magic and he should just watch. She says that none of the students can withstand even his basic skills, so the headmaster asked all the teachers to just give him credits for all this. They observe Claude, Lena, Millie, and Nina were hiding behind a column, and they feel sorry for Kane, and they decide to do something in the next lesson, which is dedicated to the adventurer. The teacher says that today there will be a special lesson for which she invited the adventurer from the G. When the group enters the class, Kane is surprised to see their friends there, and the rest of the students are delighted that they will be taught by famous adventurers. Claude asks how many students have registered in the guild, and when everyone raises their hands, they ask to see them guild cards to make sure that Kane is better than them. Kane doesn't want to do this because his card with rank might cause suspicion, and Claude insists that he show it, but Kane just lies that he forgot it at home. Disappointed, he returns to the teacher and tells the others that he will find another way. Then they take the students to practice battles and decide to start with the simplest strengthening spell. After they are explained how to do it, they force them to use magic in practice. Arranging practice battles, Kane eagerly waiting for his turn to fight with Claude, but other students are called in turn and there is no chance. He tries to approach Nina, who is training in shooting, but she refuses him, saying that he cannot use magic. The adventurers try to delay his turn as long as possible to show their strength, and Kane becomes the hero of the class when he defeated them after several hours of waiting. Finally, Kane gets a chance to fight with Claude, but as soon as they start the fight, the teacher interrupts them, informing them that the lesson is over. Claude apologizes for miscalculating the time and says that they will continue the fight next time. However, the teacher reports that you will not invite adventurers for now because you do not have the funds for this. After the boy destroys most of the property during the exam that same night, Kane goes to the forest near his hometown Grace and begins to randomly shoot fireballs and slash monsters on the right-left to take out his anger on Claude. He creates a huge pillar of fire in the forest, which scares the guards at the watchtower, who think that it is the king of demons. The guards, led by Garmo, are sent there, and history repeats itself. Garm finds Kane's handkerchief in the crater in the capital. The king receives a message from Garm about the Demon King and calls Kane to discuss the plan of action. When they decide to declare an international search and start collaborating with other countries, Kane refuses, and this makes the king think that he is hiding something. Under pressure, finally tells what really happened, and after that they no longer want to deal with him. Meanwhile, a huge dragon wakes up in a dark cave, which means that Aaron's seal has weakened, and his evil god wakes up in the body of a dragon determined to destroy the 7 gods. After a few days, the students are taught summoning magic, and Kane is about to go to class. The teacher tells him that since they will not use offensive magic, he can take part. Kane is very happy to hear this, and the teacher continues to tell the class that they will be training with a magician named Grad. Grad explains to the students 2 types of summoning magic: one when they make a contract and then summon a creature, and the other when they first summon and then make a contract. He also says that today they will be going through the second type of summoning and warns that if they can't get along with the creature and make a contract with it, it will immediately disappear. He gives them cards to create a summoning circle, and all the students begin to summon creatures of different shapes and sizes and try to make a contract with them. When Kane's turn comes, he is afraid that he might summon something dangerous. He puts in too much magic, but the Grad calms him down by saying that if the contract is not concluded, the creature will immediately disappear. But when Cain began to summon it, looking at the size of his circle and the power emanating from it, the city tried to stop him, but before he could do anything, the call ended and the Prince of Darkness, Cain himself, appeared. He immediately created a bright light so that no one would see what was happening. The prince wanted to know who called him and looked at Cain. He approached the bow and swung at the prince to defend himself. But the prince knelt down in front of the bow and began to beg him not to kill him and let him serve him, calling him the Chosen One. He introduced himself as a said that he was ready to destroy entire nations or summon demons if Cain will ask him about this. He begged Cain to conclude a contract with him. When the contract was concluded, the set disappeared and Grad asked what happened. Cain lied that he could not conclude a contract with the prince in order to avoid suspicion and sighed with relief when the instructor seemed to believe him. That same day after school, the king called him and he realized that he could not hide it as well as he thought. He told the king what happened and the king got angry and shouted at him, demanding that he learn to restrain himself. He was afraid that the prince could arrange pogrom and destroy the capital in the blink of an eye. Cain apologizes and says that when his magic began to pour into the circle, he could no longer stop, and Grad asks how much magic is needed to summon such a creature. The king replies that training with the first Kano must have raised his characteristics to the skies, not paying attention to the surprise of the magician. He asks Cain to show his status and warns that if he tells about this to someone behind outside this room, he will be executed. When Cain reveals his status, everyone in the room jumps up from their seats because now he has the status of a demigod. While the others are arguing what to call him, the king asks if he is going to destroy the kingdom or the whole world. Cain assures him that he has no such plans and asks him to treat him the same as before. The king agrees, but adds that if Cain asks, he will give him his kingdom without questions. After recovering from shock, he says that he wants to make Cain a calm and give him his own city not far from the capital if Cain copes. The king will immediately announce the engagement. He adds that this is the final decision and that this will serve Cain as training for the protection of the entire country. Returning home, Cain tells Sylvia about this, who is very happy and decides to have a festive dinner. But then Corin comes in with terrible news. He reports that Jing and Garcia received an urgent message about a monster attack in the forest. He rushes home to meet his brother, who is glad to see him. The brother says that over the past few months, the number of monster attacks has increased. The number of adventurers has increased sharply. He sent a squad of high-ranking adventurers to find out what is happening, but they came back with nothing and said that the number of monsters has increased insanely and they have all become very aggressive. He also says that he asked his father to send more experienced adventurers to Garcia through the guild, but nothing new because they have no evidence of an attack. They cannot even send a knight or soldiers, so they have to pretend that nothing is happening. Cain agrees to see what is there, but Jin protests because he is still very young. Then Cain takes out his rank card and reminds him about the red dragon that he keeps in his mansion. In the end, Jin agrees and promises to do everything in his power, and Cain decides to first go to the city guild to get more information about the situation. When he meets the new secretary in the guild, she is unhappy that Stoli is sending newbies to deal with such a serious problem, but then she sees his rank card and suddenly the old secretary Rudy jumps up and apologizes for her and then asks what happens is Cain tells her a letter from his brother and she confirms that the signs of attack are intensifying and even approaching the forest is becoming dangerous. She shows him the wounded adventurers in the guild. When Millie and Nina enter the door, Cain is very happy to see them. When he asks why they came, they answer that the guild has sent out messages to all high-ranking seekers. They add that they have already been in the forest and confirm the information he heard and say that since these monsters move in groups, the two of them will not be able to go far. They say that Claude and Lino will also soon come and join them and ask him to wait with them and not go into the forest alone. When he insists, Rudy says that if something happens to such an important person like him, it will be a big problem for the guild. He continues to insist and she asks him to take someone with him, and he assures her that he has companions. Once in the forest, he calls upon Haku and Jin, who attack him because they are happy to see him. Then Cain decides to go in search and asks his companions to warn him if they feel something. He uses magic to scan the surroundings and heads towards the nearest monster, constantly feeling that he is being watched. He defeats one monster after another but still cannot understand who is watching him and feels that something is wrong. He decides to call Seth and asks him to figure out what is wrong because his search magic is not working. Seth feels something strange and says that there is a creature around them from which powerful energy is emanating and that all the monsters are trying to get close to him. He adds that these monsters are not like those that live in his homeland and that they are all of a very high level, and the boy asks if he can find out anything else. Seth calls his subordinate who specializes in investigating Dalmatia. When Dalmatia appears, he tells Kai, well, he was once one of the 4 kings of heaven and now he uses his investigator skills for Seth. Cain asks Dalmatia to immediately go to the forest to investigate, and Dalmatia sends his subordinates while they wait. Cain and his companions defeat various strong monsters they encounter, easily destroying them. Cain says that he will return as soon as he informs the residents of the city about what is happening and teleports along with the corpses of the killed monsters. Returning to the city, he shows the monsters to the adventurer who claim that they have never seen such monsters before. At this time, Claude and Lena appear. They look at the terrifying monsters and agree that they need to be stopped before they enter the city. Cain warns them that there are even more dangerous monsters deep in the forest and therefore they need to strengthen security. Meanwhile, in the forest, Dalmatia feels that something from the other world is trying to intimidate them and warns against approaching. Seth takes it as a challenge and asks Dalmatia to use their fighting skills again because they are about to enter the forest. When Aaron feels that they are approaching, he becomes more vigilant because they do not look like followers of the gods, but he doesn't care, becomes enraged, and in response releases his monsters to freedom. Seth notices this and immediately sends the body back to the city just as the guards raise the alarm and inform Kai that the attack has begun and the monsters are moving towards the city. Cain thinks quickly and sends Rudy to the genie's mansion to inform him about this, asks Claude and Lena to gather all the adventurers and prevent the monsters from entering the city. And he decides to go into the forest with his companions. When he is about to leave, Fenna appears on her horse and says to him that Garm has requested emergency assistance and that her army is only a few miles from the city. She offers to go with him into the forest, but he asks her to stay and lead the defenders of the city and protect its inhabitants. When she assures him that Seth and Cain will do so, they run as fast as they can into the forest. Meanwhile, in the forest, Dalmatia floats in the air and with the help of magic easily deals with the dragons. At that moment, a dragon appears behind him, but as soon as he is about to attack, he is killed by Cain, who appears in time and burns him with flame. Seth informs Kai that Aaron is behind the trees that are visible from the cliff on which they are standing, and while the bow is preparing for the upcoming test, the evil god just sits and waits for him. Seth assures him that he can cope with the army of monsters and insists that he go after the leader without worrying about him. He reassures Cain by saying that his subordinates will help him, and Cain flies off to fight with Aaron. And Seth and Dalmatia fly off to their battle in the city of the Fen Leads, evacuating civilians, and the knights hold back the monsters. Nana uses her magic to scan the surroundings of the forest and tells the fighters that the wave of monsters does not stop. This worries Millie and she decides to go into the forest to help Cain and the minis, and Claude and Lena decide to go with her and leave the city. In the forest, says that the man they are helping made a contract with Sam. Seth interrupts him saying that now is not the time for explanations and orders them to engage in battle. Dark creatures fly over the hordes of monsters and shoot lasers at them, killing them. Meanwhile, Cain is still looking for Aaron and accidentally releases his hellfire to lure him out when one of his waves of magic reaches the entrance to the cave. A counter-magic blast flies at him. Cain again releases his hellfire to meet him halfway and successfully repels the attack. When the smoke clears, he sees a huge dragon lying on the ground and realizes that it is Aaron. When he stitches, is it really Aaron that his evil god answers that only one part of him was reborn, and so he had to borrow the dragon's body. Aaron immediately releases fire from his mouth, which spawns even more monsters, and when Cain asks him to stop, he says that he cannot stop the game to see if all the people were eaten by his monsters, and instead releases even more monsters. Cain, who is in the air, launches a fireball into the ground to burn the monsters as soon as they appear in another part of the forest. Claude notices people floating in the air and reports about the others, who are watching with surprise what is happening. Nina guesses that these are Cain's friends and immediately looks around, but understands that they will not be able to reach these people because many monsters are approaching them. They go into battle mode, and the brother and sister decide to deal with those who are in front. They take out swords and rush at the monsters that appear and cut to suffer, and instead he wants to kill him right away. He launches a very strong fireball at him, but Cain dodges and the ball hits the ground, burning all the monsters which were there at one time. Cain did not have time to recover from the blow when Aaron attacks him again, and Cain barely manages to dodge. He jumps to the ground as soon as the demigod lands. He launches a fireball at the dragon and takes off so as not to fall under its weight. When he looks down at the evil god, he sees that although his body is weakened, the magic did not work on Aaron. Before he has time to collect his thoughts, the dragon launches a fireball at him from the ground, which throws Cain aside. Meanwhile, Millie and the team use swords charged with magic to cut down endless monsters and hold on with their last strength, thinking about what they will drink after the battle on the other side of the forest. Cain and the dragon come to their senses and the dragon begins to chase Cain in the air, releasing fireballs at him every 2 steps. Cain suddenly turns around and calls on Haku and Jin, who race against the dragon and knocks him down. Aaron immediately starts shooting at the creatures with fire, but they dodge by jumping from side to side. This Ange got, and he hits the monsters with his tail, throwing them off the cliff. They lose consciousness. The party of adventurers begins to get tired of the battle and Nina can barely stand on her feet despite the fact that she has lost all her magical power. Lena runs up to support her and Millie and Claude continue to chop down the monsters while Claude tries to cheer them up. When the monster attacks Claude, Nina uses the remnants of her magic to throw him back and kill the Claude for a second. Turns around to check how the girl is doing and at that moment the monster pounces on him. Claude barely manages to deflect the blow with a sword. At that moment spears are stabbed into the monster and he dies. Fen rides up to them on a horse and knocks down the monster that attacks Millie and he falls right in front of them. She reports that she has brought reinforcements and assures that the city is safe. She takes command of the defense but Claude refuses to let her go alone and volunteers to fight with her and his sister. Meanwhile, the dragon releases a fireball that hits the Haku and the genie. Cain rushes towards them and creates a magical shield to protect them. Aaron, even more angry, says that Cain is acting like an obedient dog of the gods. Cain replies that the gods had nothing to do with it, and he just wants to protect the smiles of his loved ones. He again focuses on his goal and uses the same magic as his father. Many years ago to defeat Aaron, he releases a powerful fire beam. God comes to his senses and manages to reflect attack before Cain's beam hits him. They both put all their power into attacks and in the end, from the blow, a column of light rises into the sky. Haku and Jin bite the hero on the leg trying to stop him, and Seth and Dalmatia appear after seeing the light to see what happened and bring Cain out of his trance. When he calms down and looks around, he notices that he destroyed most of the forest. He begins to look for the black dragon, but his comrades calm him down, letting him know that he successfully managed to stop the attack. They told him that the monster retreated into the forest after their leader fell and now the city is safe. Happy that the danger is over, he runs back to his friends who are happy that he is safe. Steph and Dalmatia or returning home. They are honored to serve such a great man as Cain, while the heroes and his friends embrace, overflowing with happiness that he was able to protect all their smiles. However, the king immediately calls him to the capital and asks him about the pillar of light that was visible even from his palace. He tells him that the locals thought that the gods had descended to earth and this led to chaos. The boy explains what happened and tells him that the dragon was so strong that he had to use level magic. The emperor and apologizes. He is also asked to explain why the man who was seen floating in the air used magic. He is fed up with Cain and asks Magnus from the throne, to which the minister objects. The next day he officially declares Cain Vecontum Dentalian. When the Fana knows about this, she is very worried. She tells him that Rental is one of the most dangerous territories where the guild intimidates everyone, and all the nobles who were sent there fled from there. The body is going to go to his father to protest, but Cain stops her and admits that he is very interested in being in the thick of things and building a city from scratch. Soon Cain goes to the Rental and settles there. Upon arrival, he is attacked by a guild under the pretext of a welcome feast, but Cain easily defeats them and in the process greatly damages the arena. Then he goes to a restaurant to eat and relax, where he sees two customers mocking the waitress. This irritates him, and he kicks them out, for which he is arrested by the guards while he enjoys tea in the garden, wrapped in silk and a towel, and talks about this strength and body. Seth suddenly appears covered in bruises. He says that his wife found out about his betrayal and kicked him out and asks Cain to help him. At that moment his wife Laughin appears and grabs him by the ear and apologizes to Cain when she asks Cain what he thinks about her husband. The Viscount answers But to think about another woman when he is married to such an incomparable beauty. Unforgivable, after the girls, they yell at the prince. His wife warns Cain that if he ever does anything that makes these girls cry, he will be in trouble.